Good morning and grand rising, or good evening, wherever you may be listening. It is me, Papa Seer, host, narrator, and storyteller of the number one Hoodoo and spirituality based podcast, the Hoodoo and Chill Podcast. We are here today, I feel like, with the holy grail of episodes, in my opinion, or at least one of them anyway. I am so excited, you all. We are here today to talk about Mama Queen Carolyn die. In my opinion, if there was anyone who would be considered a Hoodoo Queen, the notoriety, her legacy, everything that she left behind, I feel like she definitely takes the spot on this today. As always, we are going to start today's episode talking about the backdrop, her life story, who she was prior to gaining her notoriety as a well known psychic medium, seer, spiritualist, healer, hoodoo woman, businesswoman. The list goes on. Mama Carolyn was a woman, or should I say Queen Carolyn was a woman of many talents and many titles. Before she was Carolyn Dye, she was born Carolyn Tracy. She was born into slavery in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Although her birth year is uncertain, we place this in the 1840s, around 1843. Although her parents' names are unknown, we do know that she was one of 13 siblings. All of her brothers and sisters were enslaved by William Tracy, as well as Nancy Tracy, his wife, in a plantation in Spartanburg. This is her life on the plantation is where her powers and who she becomes later really starts to take place. She was a house servant, and I think that that is something that we have to notate first before going further, was that she didn't spend her life in the fields. She worked inside of the house, and I think you have to put your mindset around that, how her life would have differentiated from a field servant. She would have been exposed to the culture of what was going on in the house. Even though she couldn't read and write, she still would have been around, just language being articulated differently versus out on the field. She would have just had exposure. Her day to day would have looked different than the average servant on the plantation. Her personality, or her gift, should I say, really starts to take shape at around age 10. And as the legend goes, she was assisting by setting plates for Thanksgiving. And she kept insisting that there needed to be an additional plate set out for Mr. Charlie. This was William Tracy's brother. She kept insisting that he was coming. Now, this was dismissed by the family because they believed that Mr. Charlie had passed away in the Civil War. She kept insisting, we need to put these plates out because he's coming to dinner. Well, lo and behold, what ends up happening is that he does return from war, and he does show up later that day and explains that he had been a prisoner of war. This was the event that really set the tone for who she would become later on. It wasn't just the populace of the enslaved people on the plantation who believed in her gift, it was also her owners. She gave this vision, or what she saw, not only to her peers, but she was talking to her masters, letting them know, hey, I have a vision, this is who's coming, and he, lo and behold, shows up. And I bring this up, and I want to just set the stage for this because At 10 years old, she has already set the tone for her life as being a member of substance of this household. Like, she brings something to the table. Her gift is something obviously that they cherish. When William Tracy dies, Nancy, his widow, then moves her children as well as all of the enslaved people that she inherited to Independence County, Arkansas. When I was doing my research on this, every piece of information that I came across kind of just glazed past this. In my spirit, of course, I'm different. I said, well, let me just see how far Independence is from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Well, it's over 800 or so miles, and during that time, it would have taken them upwards of about 3 months or so to make that journey. And I sat with myself and I said, "This is something we have to notate because this is out of the norm for most people who would have been enslaved during that time, spending 3 months off of the plantation, traveling literally across the country. She would have been exposed to so many different people. She would have been exposed to people of color. She would have saw the world. She would have had a different mindset and understanding of life outside of the plantation. You also have to also take note that during this time, while they're making this journey, the Civil War is currently going on too. And I argue that Caroline had a hint that she was going to be free one day. She had traveled, she had saw things. There's this war going on. There's whispers in the air of freedom. There's whispers in the air, potentially, slaves being let free. And I'm thinking, just because of who she turns out to be later on in life, that something in her mindset changed from this journey. Again, this is just me throwing my theory out there. I would love to know what you think thus far about just this backstory of who she is and who she will become later. By 1865, she's emancipated, as with the rest of the enslaved populace. After she gains her freedom, she soon marries a formerly enslaved man by the name of Martin Dye. We have records of them getting married on June 16th, 1867. Oh, wow. Her anniversary is coming up. That is so odd. Her anniversary is coming up. Shout out to happy anniversary, Mama Carolyn Dye. This is so ironic. So they settled in Elgin, which is also in Jackson County, Arkansas, briefly, and they had a daughter. And it is believed that their daughter died in infancy. But as many other hoodoo women do, godmothers, she wasn't just raising her child, she was raising several other children in that household as well. And I'm assuming these probably would have been nieces and nephews because she came from a really large family. She had 12 brothers and sisters. And I'm assuming these would have been nieces and nephews, cousins, maybe children from, the local populace. We have to remember pre this is post emancipation. And I think that even the story of post emancipation plays a huge role in who she is and who she becomes, because there's this layer of uncertainty in the air. Okay. A lot of children were displaced from their families. So, you go to bed a slave, you wake up free. And 2 weeks ago, your mom might have been sold off. So now you're free as a child, but who's there to take care of you? Okay, so I truly believe that she was a pillar of the community. She might have taken in children who didn't have anywhere to go at that time. And it's even in these years, these foundational years, or, these transitional years after slavery, that her gifts of seership are still remembered. And it is during this time when she really starts to embrace them and grows into who she is. Her rise to prominence as a hoodoo seer happens around the 1870s going into the 1900s. This is in the post-Reconstruction era. Carolyn died, she quietly honed in on her reputation as a local root worker, healer, spiritual advisors. And this was, of course, around the turn of the century. Around this time, her and her husband, they moved to the town of Newport, Arkansas. And Newport is the place where she really gains her fame and where she makes her home. She establishes roots here permanently. Carolyn died, never learned to read and write. She was classified as uneducated. But even still, she managed to create immense wealth for herself. And I think that this is the part of her story that sometimes gets overshadowed by her gifts or even the hoodooism. And even though we are here because of her connection to hoodooism, and even though we are referring to her as the Hoodoo Queen, I want to step out there and say she was more than just that. This woman was literally walking, talking industry. She was a business on her own. My theory is that she knew what she was doing. People like to I keep reading all of this about her, that this quiet, she moved so quietly and as if she didn't really know what she was doing, and almost like this humble factor. But I argue that just as a business person, as a person who lives and makes my living in the hoodoo business, I don't believe that. I think that this was just strategy. I don't think that people give her enough credit for how smart this woman was, how intelligent she was. So she moves to Newport, Arkansas, and this is where her business blossoms. They say that within a 400-mile radius, people knew her, that she was more famous than the president at this time, and that people in droves were literally coming into Newport, Arkansas just to see this woman. And there are a lot of factors to this that I want to break down before moving forward. One, again, this is post emancipation. There aren't a lot of doctors. And again, like I said, there's this layer of just uncertainty in the air. People don't know what they're gonna do. People don't know what's getting ready to happen. And so having somebody in the community with this gift of being able to connect to spirit, connect to the divine, foretell the future. Obviously, this person would have been an asset to everyone in the community because her clientele was mixed race. It wasn't just black people, it was white people, it was everyone coming to her. I think a lot of her wealth came from these farmers in the South who would have been hurt and destitute. After the Civil War, the South went through a horrible period where it had to reconstruct itself. A lot of the fields, the plantations, the industry that was coming out of the South, it was destroyed during the war. So I can see a lot of these white plantation owners being desperate and coming to this woman for luck bags and luck charms, or even just advice on how to move in the business world. And that is something, a lot of us who operate in that field as a spiritualist like myself, I tend to attract a lot of people who come to me for spiritual advice or spiritual guidance as it relates to business. It's not always about something so personable. It's sometimes it's literally just about how to move, what decisions they want to make from a business sense, and what does spirit have to offer them for that. So I can imagine just her amassing this wealth because she died an extremely wealthy woman. And we'll get into that later. How a lot of that would have come from those white people, farmers in that area who really would have believed in her guidance. Not to mention to the black community as well. that she serviced. She didn't charge anyone for her work. And I want to put that out there as well. She didn't have this set price. And I think that's for many reasons. And to keep her out of jail, we have to remember that a lot of these practices during that time were illegal and outlawed. So to accept money for doing something that was illegal, she would have been sent to jail. So I truly believe that this was a strategy where she didn't have a price, but people gave her offerings and gave her donations. What I also wanted to talk about was the home, the way that she operated her home. And it said that she owned 8 different farms and that she was a person who purchased a lot of property, that she went into the rental business and things of that nature. But she also, her main operating house, the one where she lived, they said it was always busy, was constantly packed, that even the home that she lived in, she operated that as if it were a business. So I want you all to kind of imagine this woman as an attraction for this area. And I think that she knew that. I'm gonna step on a limb and say I believe that she knew that she was becoming a living attraction for Newport, Arkansas. That if you were traveling to Newport, Arkansas, whether you were coming to see family or not, like go stop by and see Mama Carolyn, go get a reading from her, have an experience with this woman that everyone knows. This one, like she literally, like I said, was a living attraction. She cashed in on that. So when people would come to her house, she was serving plates. She had people in there cooking food. I believe the plates, from what I read, were 38 cents a plate. She had a system because people sent her a lot of mail, where she would actually respond and do readings via mail. She had people opening up mail for her and take, because they would put the money in the mail, and of course, getting her donations from the mail system and helping her respond to those letters because she couldn't read and write. She had a system of employment. People were doing things for her. She wasn't solely operating by herself. This woman literally was creating her own kingdom in Newport, Arkansas. And that is one of the reasons why I step out there and I give her the title queen, not just because she was so powerful in hoodooism. I think power is one thing, but to what you do with the power that God is giving you. Or if you are able to employ those around you, create jobs in the community, be a pillar and a staple of the community, purchase property, have a place where you can give other people shelter and food. And she had all of these things going on. She had literally created her own kingdom. So when you do that, I have to tip my hat to you and say, yes, that is a queen, that is a king right there, because what is a king or a queen with no kingdom? There's a lot we can learn from her. My favorite story that showcased how much of an attraction she was in this community was the fact that they talked about trains that were coming in from Memphis into Newport, and they would dub some of these trains called the Carolyn Die Special, because the train would literally be packed with people specifically coming to see her. Her patronage is in not only just her seership or her uncanny ability of that. She was a devout card reader as well. She used playing cards. And the more I did research into her story, I found so many parallels between her and myself that I really truly fell in love with her a lot more, than other than just the things that I've heard when I really put some intentional research into her and began to profile her myself. It gave a lot of confirmation on things that I'm doing or teaching that are right. And I love her usage of playing cards because I have done many podcasts and I have more coming in the future where we will revisit how to use a regular pack of playing cards for divination. And I think when people really get into this system and put the time into learning it, because it is difficult, you will see how layered the system is and how much you can gain just from a regular deck of playing cards. Again, this isn't an easy system to learn. So it again just confirms how smart and intelligent this woman was, although they classified her as uneducated. The community sought her for her ability to help them find lost livestock, valuables, a lot of times missing loved ones. She never advertised her services. Again, she didn't even overtly refer to herself as a fortune teller. She referred to herself as a spiritualist. And I actually love that too. Again, I have talked a lot about how spiritualism and hoodooism are parallel to one another, and that at some point, to learn one, you are going to have to learn the other, because traditionally, that is how certain people did their practice or went about their practice. And Miss Di, Mama Carolyn, Queen Carolyn, she was one of them. She identified herself as a clairvoyant spiritualist, hands-on healer, root worker, and utilized the language of saying she could lift curses off of people. She did have her boundaries. And I think that every practitioner of substance should have boundaries. Queen Carolyn had conviction about herself. She did not dabble in love affairs. She did not dabble in putting curses on people, which is crazy because people always like to refer to her as a two-headed doctor in a sense, or talk about how people were scared of her or how people feared her. But the research that I've done, the extensive research that I've done on her, I think that we are using the word two-headed doctor incorrectly. I should probably have a podcast about that one day. But I'm seeing this woman more so as a doctor to a community, a pillar of a community, more so than a person that was feared. Now, was there an element of fear to her? Absolutely. As with any hoodoo worker, people had a fear of them just as much as this attraction and benevolence that some of them would walk with. She claimed to work with spirit guides as well. Queen Carolyn was a practitioner who did incorporate the usage of spirit helpers, which would be a more traditional black way of saying it, helpers, but the modern term that has been coined is spirit guide, and she did associate herself with spirit guides. My favorite part of her life is how she amassed her wealth, and I use the word wealth. This woman was rich. She was a very wealthy woman when she passed away, and she did it quietly. There wasn't any oral notations of her being over the top or being a show off or outlandish in any way. If you look at the one picture that survives of her, from afar, it looks like she's just in a regular black dress, or it might even be navy blue. It's not much. But if you look in on the picture, like if you zoom in on the picture, her hair is done. That's actually a very regal dress for that time for a woman who would have been a slave, and she's taking pictures, and the dress is actually pretty regal. It was plain, it was simple because that was just the fashion of the time. But if you look at the material, around, her little cufflings and things, it's a pretty regal dress. So this woman, in my opinion, was the epitome of quiet luxury. And now, even though it's a trend on social media, but she was a black woman who had came up out of slavery. And I think that she was smart enough to know to be quiet about her luxury, because at the end of the day, she was still a black woman in Jim Crow South. When she died, her estate was valued at over $100,000, which today isn't much, but in that time, that was equivalent to over $2 million. In the early 1900s, late 1800s, she knew what wealth was. She knew the value of owning property. She wasn't just a hoodoo woman, she was a landlord. she didn't leave behind any heirs. I wonder what the story was behind her pregnancy because she had that one daughter. Her name was Hannah, and she died at infancy, but there aren't any other accounts about her having any other children, and she was married. And I always wondered about that because they always talk about other children being in the home, and I wonder if some of those children were her husband's children from a past or prior relationship. What was her aversion to having another baby? Was she unable to? There was a lot that wasn't spoken of when it came in terms of her biological children. I would love to know what you think might have been the case there, especially from women. However, she did leave behind her fortune to her niece and her nephew, and 14 other people as well. So I love this part of the story because it talks about generational wealth, that when she passed away, she obviously knew that you can't just take it with you, and she left it. She left something behind of 14 different people. And for those of you that may not necessarily have children, or you may not have been blessed with biological children, I want you to know that leaving a legacy behind doesn't always require that. If that's not in the cards for you, or even if it's just something that you may not want, or physically your body is unable to do, understand that your legacy can be left behind in many different ways. And I think that this woman also too, I don't know why my spirit is reaching out to say this to you, to women. I have such a soft spot in my heart for women that struggle with any type of birthing issues or infertility issues. I want you to also understand that this is a spirit guide that can be prayed to for comfort in that area, or for a woman who might have lost a child, right? Like, this was a woman who lost her child at infancy, a baby girl, and yet she still found it in herself to be able to give back to her community every single day. And I wonder too, because grief looks so different for many of us, did she mask her grief by just pouring so much into the community, by becoming a community servant, becoming a mother to the community? What do you think? Carolyn died probably has been one of my most favorite people to go into this much depth of research about, and I enjoyed every single moment of it, just being able to tell this story from a different lens, being able to gather my own opinions and profile her in a way that I think elevated her status today. I want us to really appreciate what she did leave behind, what she did do for a community, her time that was spent, and her presence. Spirit has been ministering to me so much about just your presence being really admired, or not taken advantage of, but appreciated. So, if you were to take anything away from this podcast today, is to appreciate her presence. Even though you weren't there, you weren't allowed to experience it, you still can appreciate it. You can still venerate her spirit internally. You can still offer her a thank you for what you left behind for us, what you helped preserved and keep alive. We can take away from her character of just community work. I couldn't find any negative anything about this woman. There is so much that we can take from this woman, just this archetype that she left behind beyond just hoodooism, the archetype of being successful, business, literally crawling your way to the top, resilience, how to overcome grief. Okay, this woman lost a child. She had to bury a child before she became a community servant to everyone else. The archetype of leaving behind generational wealth, and just looking to the future, and just understanding that the things that we're doing right now, you cannot take it with you. And you should appreciate it right now because it is for right now. But also, how is it going to impact those who will be here when you're no longer here? I would hope that one day somebody can listen to the podcast and it's still available somewhere floating around the internet. Somebody 200 years from now can listen to our words and our thoughts and our opinions on hoodooism, how we kept it alive in 2025. Because to be honest with you, this is our time. We're doing something totally different. This was unheard of. We're able to preserve our history through our own words because once upon a time, the only way this was preserved was when white people were coming into black neighborhoods, asking for the work, asking for all of the knowledge to take it back to Washington, D.C. and exploit it and then lock it away. And then we can't even have access to it today. Carolyn, I love you. Thank you so much for all that you have done. I hope this podcast reaches whoever it needs to. And I look forward to reading you all's comments. I also looking forward to you all grilling me in the comments too, because those are always fun. And with that being said, I'm gonna log off here. I offer you all nothing but love, light, peace, prosperity, and abundance. I bless your hands. May the things you touch materialize as if it were gold. I send you out in love, light, peace, prosperity. And may spirit have nothing but bountiful encounters with you. And with that, my people, I release you into the atmosphere.